The numbers coming out in the last 6 months about the anticipated deficit that this world's going to be in respect to copper are staggering. Welcome back to another pod. If you enjoy it, please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Today we're going to jump into copper. The numbers coming out in the last 6 months about the anticipated deficit that this world's going to be in respect to copper are staggering. Base case, according to an S&P Global report, if everything goes rather well for new mines coming online, production increasing, etc., by 2040, the world will be in a deficit of around 2 million tons annually. That's in a good scenario. In a bad scenario, almost 10 million ton deficit. For context, last year, the entire world produced 21 million tons. And for further context, there's no EV, electrification, decarbonization revolution without copper. Probably the most important metal there is for that movement. Further headwinds for the sector include all the infrastructure build-outs that China, with its One Belt, One Road initiative, the U.S. with its $1.2 trillion stimulus package, which is heavily focused on infrastructure, India wanting to build roads and bridges, etc. India, don't forget, will be the most populous country in the world next year. And that, never mind what the EU's doing, never mind what Canada plans to do in South America. The world is going to be very, very desperate for copper. Consider this. For an offshore wind farm to produce 1 megawatt of power, it needs 8,000 kilograms of copper. A combustion engine vehicle requires about 23 kilograms of copper, I believe it is, but an EV requires 80 kilograms of copper. Now consider the fact that many countries and regions want to basically outlaw combustion engine vehicles within the next 10, 15 or 20 years, depending on the country. Imagine instead of 1% of the cars on the road, this is going to happen. Imagine instead of 1% of the cars on the road being electric, there's now 40% of the cars on the road being electric. What does that do to demand? At the current rate, the world won't even have nearly enough copper to support that build out. And it's believed that by 2035, the world might be able to add 3 to 4 million tons of copper production to the supply space, if all goes well. Now, I want you to consider one last thing, and I know I'm going on a rant here. When's the last time you heard about a greenfield project go from exploration to production in North America? When's the last time you heard a project discovery being made for copper and then going into production?
Long time.
It's been a long time. Probably more than 5, closer to 10 years. There is a world-class asset sitting in America right now, world-class copper project that probably would crack the top 5 leading copper mines on the planet. It was discovered 25 years ago, okay? It's been in the permitting process for 20 years.
Where is it, like Colorado or Montana?
It's called Resolution Mine, and I think it might be Arizona or Nevada. Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, it must be in the wrong county, right? Because they've got dozens of mines and some of the biggest copper mines in the U.S. So it's just, it depends where you are. Again, location is so critical.
But the reality is when we just talk about copper, the only, let's call it, assets that aren't in production, let's call them that, the only ones that have a hope in hell of going into production in the next 5 to 10 years are brownfield plays. Greenfield plays in North America are very, very difficult to get into production. Never mind the cost, the time, the permitting, etc. It's very hard for these to get into production. So we're extremely reliant on increased production from current mines or brownfield projects that are, at least have some permitting hurdles cleared already. I really strongly believe in the next 3 to 5 years, we will be in the mother of all bull markets for copper, just based on the supply and demand fundamentals due to everything I just discussed.
Yeah, the electrification movement has left the station. Governments, politicians have gone all in on this move that it's going to take new world-class copper mine being discovered and put into production every few years to make that a reality. They're just, you know what? It sounds good. It looks good. This is the direction we're going. Okay, let's make it happen. We're going to make, all these mandates and deadlines, and we're all switching to EVs. But the reality is, okay, well, then you're going to have to change policy elsewhere and fast track some of these projects, or like you said, you don't really have a hope in hell of meeting demand.
And if we want a secure supply that we can rely on for generations to come, in order to do that, we're going to have to go out and dig another deep hole in the ground, and it's called a porphyry copper deposit.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to turn them into open pit mines.
Yeah.
Mining will never be escaped in our world. It will never be escaped. It's just, what are we mining that will change? That's it.
There are companies trying to create a closed loop, 100% recyclable EV or battery or what have you. But there's so much demand. There's so many millions of cars that to get there to the point where you can just recycle everything, I mean, it's totally unfeasible.
And if you consider that copper demand is expected to increase by about 50% in some estimations and up to double by 2040, you consider that, and then you look at, okay, how much copper do we source from recycling? And it's about 30% of what we use every year is recycled copper. So that's good, but it's not going to keep up with demand. If you look at the leading copper mines in the world, they come from really two countries. You can throw in Indonesia with one, but it's Chile and Peru. Chile is pushing forward this mining law, this new mining law, which basically increases the revenue for the government from these mines. The industry is strongly opposed to it, but I think it's going to go through. That's going to be a driver of costs, no question about it. Drive up the cost of copper at some point. Peru is in a bit of a show right now from a political standpoint. Google it, take a look. It's too long of a story to tell on this pod.
Oh yeah.
So that those two countries combined are almost half the world's production of copper. We've become comfortable relying on Chile for copper. I don't know if we can long term. Who knows what happens? Look at Panama with First Quantum. That came out of nowhere, right? Another copper deposit, another massive copper deposit. First Quantum, one of Canada's leading mining companies, is now in a dispute with the Panamanian government over their asset that they've been working on and put billions into. And the Panamanian government wants more money.
They built a port. They did it all. You know, I've been to Peru a few times. I was in Arequipa a few days after a huge riot. There was literally blood on the streets. The streets were stained with blood. To your point on Panama, there's an election next year, and he wants to redistribute all the cash from First Quantum Minerals and give it to the people, or say, you know, whatever he's using in his campaign pitch. But you know the story. They had agreed to 1% to 2% royalty. The government jacked it to 12% to 16% gross profit margins. First Quantum said, sure, okay, we'll do it. And then they added a 25% corporate tax rate. They said,
and
sure.
And more and more. And where does it stop, right? And this risk,
it didn't stop. It kept going.
And this risk, which is on the rise, which is sort of quasi-resource nationalism, is on the rise. As we're saying, what does that do? It increases costs. It increases risk for investors to invest in these mines. If you take a look at copper production, almost 2/3 of the world's copper production comes from communist or socialist countries. There is a chance in the next 5 years that we see production disruptions in one of these countries.
Oh, yeah.
A very good chance. Now, what will that do as demand surges in copper because of all the new applications we want to use it for? What will that do to the price? This is why I'm extremely bullish on copper over the next 3 to 5 years. I think there'll be disruptions in production. I think it's going to be a lot harder to bring new mines into production, and we won't be able to keep up with demand. We already are having issues keeping up with demand.
It's the kind of metal, even if we go into a 6-month or 18-month recession, governments, like the mandates from governments to move towards EVs could underplant the demand side to the point that you'll have governments lining up, buying tons and tons and stockpiling it for their future, you know, rollout of different renewable energy programs.
Absolutely, which is exactly what the Japanese did when China threatened to cut them off from rare earths.
Yeah.
They started stockpiling. Their goal was to get 18 months of reserves. So in case they were threatened again, they were taken care of. They had their own supply they could deal with for a year or so.
It's only smart to do that. And I think a lot of countries probably do. We don't hear about it. It's not in the headlines. But all countries should have strategic reserves.
And what else do governments do when their economies start to slow or when they hit a significant recession? They try to create shovel-ready jobs. There's which means roads, bridges, schools, hospitals. All of those infrastructure programs from FDR all the way to Biden's infrastructure plan, the $1.2 trillion stimulus that he wants to, that's already been passed, I should say, bipartisanly. All of these agendas push shovel-ready jobs. They all require thousands of tons of copper to deliver. Anytime there's a recession, one of the first commodities to rebound is copper. A significant recession, because it's used in infrastructure and governments want to create shovel-ready jobs, or at least help create them. So I like copper long term. I'm not saying it's not going to have its volatility. Of course it will. It's a commodity. But 3 to 5 years, I'm extremely bullish on copper.
So yeah, for investors and speculators out there, you can't just sit around. You got to start compiling a list and doing the research now, and having your 5 or 10 favorite copper companies and names, be it exploration, production, have a mix, so that when copper's revalued and everyone wakes up to this huge demand side shortfall, that you're ready, that you're there and you're in position.
I think right now, if my thesis is right, and it's gonna, within 3 to 5 years, we're gonna have a mother of a bull market for copper. I think you want to look at those development stage copper companies, those ones with, the feasibility studies in hand, a robust economics on their project that perhaps haven't reached production, but things are looking good and permitting doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue. Those are kind of the dream scenario opportunities, but I think you'll have more leverage in a copper bull market with some of the development stage players out there right now.
There's no safe jurisdiction when it comes to mining. Doesn't matter if you're in Canada or the US, almost any project can get shut down. There's always a degree of risk. There's inherent risk. Whenever you're dealing with mining, it doesn't matter which country you're in, there's always going to be risk there.
I think that about wraps it up. If you enjoyed the pod, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Until next time, take care.